Hello and welcome to this episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. On time as always, starting promptly at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time.
That's right.
And tonight, of course, we'll be talking about all those wonderful character posters and the Vanity Fair article about Rings of Power. Nope, sorry, wrong stream. Wrong stream.
Wrong stream.
We don't talk about it. Everything here is purely hypothetical because this is the Silmarillion Film Podcast, where we prefer to talk about Tolkien adaptations. What was that phrase we used to say? Something about untrammeled
by reality. That's it. Yes. That's it.
Yes. Things like budget or limits on the number of people we could cast or travel.
Negotiations with actors' agents have never been easier than on the Film Project.
That's right. Yep. We just
never has a cast been more docile and easier to manage than the cast of the Film Project.
We just put their pictures in a PowerPoint, vote, and cast,
That's it.
And we're done. Move on.
And it's done. And they're always awesome. And they always do such a wonderful job.
You know, it just occurred to me is how remarkable it is that we haven't lost any yet.
Yeah.
None of them have died yet?
No.
If they do we replace them?
Well, that's a good question.
We're going to have to, I guess.
Because we had a near miss because Sean Connery was nominated a few times. In fact, he was nominated for Beor. So that would have been...
Did we ever nominate Alan Rickman for anything?
No, I think he ever did. Passed away pretty early in the process.
Okay, that's right.
I think he would have had to be one of the Valar in season 1 or something.
Yeah. But it is kind of amazing we didn't nominate him. So
a little bit. I think given more time, I don't think we saw him as one of the Valar, and then there wasn't time. But
there will come a point when we will reach our limit, and we will necessarily start casting people posthumously. And we'll be like, we can't think of anyone who's alive.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know. The technology continues to get better. So.
Yes. Oh, that's true. That's true. That's such a good point. Yeah.
I mean, like
that limit's gone too.
I have to admit that like young Mark Hamill in the Book of Boba Fett last week was genuinely creepy. Like I was like, it was a very different experience than like young Leia at the end of Rogue One, basically.
Yes. Because that was only for a few seconds.
Exactly.
I'll tell you that spoiler alert, anybody who
I haven't seen the last one yet.
No, not the last one. No.
Okay.
Anybody who has not seen the Book of Boba Fett, hold your ears for a few seconds.
Okay.
His appearance in his longer appearance in the one episode of the Book of Boba Fett was worlds better than the original appearance, and it turns out it's
at the end of season 1, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yep. And it turns out it's because there were YouTubers who had figured out a way to make him look better, and so Disney hired them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
To work on it. Yeah. So it's getting really close.
Yes.
That's cool. That's very cool.
By the way, this, of course, is not a casting episode of the Silmarillion Film Project.
It's not. This is a typical digression at the beginning of a Film Project episode.
I kind of feel like I think this should be like a new category in casting. Every time we do a casting session, there should be at least one posthumous nomination. CGI recreated nomination.
Right. Yeah. It does open up the big like. You know, what are we going to cast Carrie Fisher as question, right? You know, Oh dear, sorry, I love Nick's face there. Anyway, we better move forward, or else you know, Marie's going to be all like, I'm jumping on there in just a minute and making them move forward. So, welcome. So we're going to be continuing to work through we're trying to get our minds around the trajectories of these storylines. We've done some really cool work in the last 2 episodes, thinking about the Sauron plot and the Thurin-Gwethel plot and how all that is going to be working out. Really excited about a lot of those ideas. We've got a couple questions to do today. What we're working around to eventually, right, is actually how are we going to handle the Beren and Luthien story itself? What things do we need to focus on? Are there things that we need to, cut or alter? And of course, always the question about are there elements from earlier versions, like from the Tale of Tenuviel and the Book of Lost Tales, that we want to bring in, and not just how the story is told in the published Silmarillion. So eventually, that's what we're getting around. But we made the deliberate choice to talk about Beren and Luthien at the end, so that we can have the idea of like all of these minor plot lines and characters that are around the side. We need to kind of have those as fixed points so that we know how the story of Beren and Luthien is going to kind of weave around them, I think. So today, the aspiration is to discuss Glaurung and Thingol. What are they up to during the course, even though they're not going to be on screen for, well, especially Glaurung, not going to be on screen much in this season, but we need to have an explanation. We need to have a story attached to that. We need to figure that out. First, before we get too much further in, quick announcement. Wanted to draw people's attention to our space program. Our space program has been expanding. We've got a bunch of new stuff there. In the next couple months, you can come to our space program and learn about any or all of the following things. We have modules on learning ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. You can learn ancient Greek. Also, we're going to do ancient Greek both as a beginning language and also as an advanced reading course. So like if you've learned Greek in the past, but maybe your Greek's a little rusty and it's been many years, we're going to have a reading class where you can kind of brush up your Greek again. We're doing a module on the history of anime and anime's connection to the history of Japan in the 20th century. A really, really fascinating study. You can do Old Norse, again, on 2 levels. You can start learning Old Norse from the beginning, or if you've studied Old Norse before, you can come. We're going to do an advanced reading module set on the Volsunga Saga. You can read through the Volsunga Saga together. And again, keep your hand in on your Old Norse. Couple Tolkien modules, a bridge to the Silmarillion for folks who have read The Lord of the Rings and have never really gotten into the Silmarillion. We have a whole module to sort of help to kind of bridge that gap between The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion for folks. There's going to be a special module called Pity in The Lord of the Rings, taught by Tom Hillman. Really excited about that one. Looking at that theme and idea of pity throughout the text. We're going to do a Latin reading class on Hobbitus Illa, the Latin translation of The Hobbit, coming up soon. So lots of things happening in our space program. Encourage folks to look into this, signumuniversity.org/space. All right. Now, looking at the map here for a second, because we're starting with Glaurung. And there are 2 separate ways in which Glaurung, it's really tempting in a sense, to leave Glaurung sort of out of sight, out of mind, right? Because Glaurung is totally not connected to the storyline of season 6, right? We have no plans or indeed interest in involving Glaurung in Beren and Luthien's story. It's not a Glaurung story, and we don't want to make it a Glaurung story. Moreover, when we look at the map here, right, we left him at Hellevorn, way up here in the northeast corner of Beleriand, right? So, and all of the action is going to be taking place, from between Doriath, Nargothrond, Tol Sirion, Angband, right? It's all in this central zone, beginning and ending with Doriath. Well, okay, Dorthonion as well, obviously, with Beren. But anyway, the point is, we're not going to go anywhere near. We needn't go anywhere vaguely near Lake Hellevorn during the course of this season if we wanted to avoid that. So, theoretically possible, we could leave sleeping dragons where they lie and just not talk about it, right? But I think there are several reasons why we don't want to do that, right? One issue here is that Glaurung's a big deal. It's a big deal, and he's gonna be a very important character for us after this season, right? He's going to become, I don't know if we could say he's exactly the protagonist. I mean, he's not exactly the protagonist of the Near Ninth Arnoidiad, though he's gonna have an important story in the Near Ninth. But after the Near Ninth is when he's going to become the dominant force in all of Beleriand for a while. So what's he up to? What's going on with Glaurung? If we don't talk about him, if we just leave him in the keep, right? in Keep Helivorn the whole season. What are the consequences of that? So, Nick, let's start there. What would you say, Nick, would be the consequence, like the narrative consequence, the consequences for our story of just abandoning Glaurung in Keep Helivorn? That's obviously like the path of least resistance, right? Is like, let's just, pay no attention to the dragon in the castle. Hey, Marie, welcome.
So there are two major consequences that I can think of right off the bat. One is that we'll have to deal with how he gets back to Angband for the Near-Ninth the following season.
Yeah.
It's not a huge deal. You can find a way to do that.
Right. Presumably the Near-Ninth is not going to start in episode 1 of season 7, so there would be time. But yes, I hear you.
The bigger issue is essentially one of logistics, because Keep Helivorn stands on the Dwarf Road. He is, if not cutting off trade with the dwarves, it's certainly making it very difficult. Mm-hmm. The other major issue on that front, which Steve has brought up, is that he's stuck behind enemy lines. Right. Now, could he be perfectly happy to himself be behind enemy lines? Sure. I don't think he cares that much.
Right.
But I do think it unlikely that Maedhros would be satisfied to allow this extremely potent enemy to sit behind his lines in a position that puts Maedhros at a disadvantage.
Yes.
Politically, economically, with the people that he just made inroads with during the Dagor Bragollach, essentially.
Yeah.
So I find I'm incredulous that Maedhros does absolutely nothing during that period of time. I could see him trying to do something and failing to do it, because this is the father of dragons we're talking about.
Yeah.
But to do nothing seems odd.
Yeah, I agree. Here's that I got on my copy of the text while you were talking, because you're right, and I agree with you and Steve. Here's the thing that's weirdest to me about just leaving him behind enemy lines, right? Again, as you say, it's no problem for him, right? But it's a problem for the Feanorians. It's a problem for Maedhros, because I'm going to the beginning of the Near-Ninth Nodiad chapter, like right after the Beren and Luthien. Okay, so the first paragraph of this chapter is the end of the Beren and Luthien story, right? But right after that, we get, in those days, Maedhros, son of Feanor, lifted up his heart, perceiving that Morgoth was not unassailable, right? Like, the story after starts with Maedhros, right? And if we don't do anything about Glaurung, one way or another, then Maedhros, our Maedhros story, which is one of the big Maedhros stories, right, which is going to culminate tragically in the Near-Ninth Nodiad, has to begin with, okay, Maedhros takes heart. Morgoth is not assailable. So, step one, let's finally kick that dragon out of the, really? We know that they took losses, tactical loss, not just losses of soldiers, but like tactical losses, ground losses, and the enemy comes through the passes and stuff over there on the side. But we also are told in the text, and I think it makes perfect sense and sets up the Near-Ninth importantly, that Maedhros reconsolidates it after the battle, right? The Feanorians recover. And there is no definition of recovery that can include, but there's a dragon in Keep Helivorn, right? I mean, that can't. So sooner or later, if he doesn't just leave for some reason of his own, right, or of Morgoth's, they have to deal with him, and it's either sooner or it's later. And later feels weird. Like, on the one hand, my vote would be against having the Feanorians deal with the dragon, because that's a big old story, right? I mean, we're going to have to do that somehow. We're not going to have time to have, a dragon eviction from Keep Hellvorn, howsoever we contrive it, it's going to take a significant chunk of an episode at least to do that.
Yeah.
And how is that going to fit in the whole rest of the story? Not to mention it, in my opinion, kind of makes Celebgorm and Curufin extra weird. Right? We have them in Nargothrond. Why, yeah, exactly. If Maedhros is like calling up a posse to evict, why are his brothers being like, it's okay, we're busy causing trouble down here in Nargothrond, we can't be bothered? Like, that's super weird, right? So I think, and again, so it's going to take too much time, but I don't want it to happen next season either. I mean, we could theoretically be like, episode 1, the eviction of the dragon. Like, it's theoretically possible, but it doesn't feel like it fits in that season. Exactly. Murray, what are you thinking?
The issue with leaving the dragon where he is through the end of this season is that, as you point out, it doesn't quite work with the story of the Feanorians in East Beleriand.
Yeah.
But our story with Beren and Luthien is also going to end in East Beleriand, and they're going to move to Assyrian, this place of peace where they're far removed from the war to the north. If there's a dragon in Keep Hellvorn and there's nothing between the dragon and Assyrian, like that does change the end of our story a bit.
It's worse. It's worse than that. You know who's living with the Green Elves right now? Caranthir.
Yeah.
I mean, not in Assyrian, but until we find a better place for him to be, like home.
Right. Doing some reconstruction projects. Yes. No, I agree. We can't have Caranthir floating around. Talk about changing the dynamics of the region.
So there's some narrative problems though.
There are some narrative
This has been the thing that I've been really wrestling with, because if we do it too early in the season, right? It feels like we're setting up that we're going to tell a story about Glaurung, and if we don't do that, now we have a problem. If we do it too late in the season, then again, why was nobody interested in doing anything about this?
Right.
You know, Maedhros goes ahead and you know, we're told in the text that he regains control of the Pass of Anak and the gap of Maglor.
Yeah.
Right. Relatively quickly. We're told that happens, and I believe that happens because all of the soldiers that took those areas had to move westward to consolidate their power, because they had a stranglehold on Dorthonion, and they wanted to make sure they consolidated that.
Yeah.
And you're right that having the Feanorians go after him feels a little weird too. But there is another faction to consider, and I'd like to at least float this. I don't know how good it is, but we do have another storyline that we were considering talking about, of some people who might take an interest in Keep Hellvorn being dragon free, and that's the dwarves.
We were thinking of a dwarf plotline,
and it would be kind of interesting to kind of, and we'd have to be very, very careful and coy with this, but to kind of presage the quest for Erebor.
And not only that, but set up the dwarf on dragon action in the Near Ninth Arnoidiad as well.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Their particular enmity of them.
Exactly. Yeah. We prepare for that. Yes. I guess, first of all, I like the idea of the dwarves evicting him better than I like the idea of Maedhros doing it. Just, again, because it complicates Celebgorm and Curufin. It makes it a bigger storyline, right? I mean, come on. Let's face it. The dwarves have always been the C-plot in our show so far. Like, they've never not been the C-plot. right? So, like, no one who's been paying attention is going to expect that to be a major storyline when we introduce the dwarves there. But it does set up some work for later on. So I like it better. My fear is that anybody actually evicting the dragon is going to take time. Like, it's going to take time to do. I mean, and we have so little time in this season for all the things that we need to do. However much time it's on, but I feel also guilty criticizing this idea because I don't have a better idea. I have literally no idea what to do with Glaurung, because
I mean,
the other option, right, is to have him recalled, right? To have him recalled. But I'm sorry, that's a problem too. It's a problem too, because where is he then? Right? Where is he then? He can cross distance pretty quickly. So he would have to be recalled really late in the season for him not to be an Angband when Beren and Luthien get there. Right? I mean, we'd have to just leave him in Hellevorn for like a long period of time, and then he gets recalled. I don't want to... If he gets put to sleep by like the outskirts of, the outer ripples of Luthien's sleep spell, like, that's a bad look for Glaurung of the Turin story. Like, he's kind of a bigger deal than that. It would lessen him. We'd risk lessening him, right? Anyway, it's awkward, and he can't. If he's called back to be a guard, why is he not guarding? And what's the point of Karkaroth, right? I mean, we need Karkaroth anyway, right?
Right. The idea of recalling him as a guard would be after Karkaroth.
After Karkaroth, right? Okay,
right. So
right.
it would be that at that point in the season, and it would be to show that here's Morgoth being like, "Oh no, I just got attacked in my own home. I'm feeling uncomfortable," and my door ward, my real fancy wolf, is now like running wild somewhere.
Right.
I need a new door ward. Hey, Glaurung, time for you to come back.
Right. Which would mean that it would have to be in the penultimate, if not the final episode of the season.
Right. It would be around the time of the Hunt for the Wolf, so the penultimate episode of the season. And it solves the problem of being a fast thing, because all Morgoth has to do is say, come back, and he comes back.
And he comes back, yeah.
But
agreed.
It does not solve the problem of, so he was sitting there for 7 years.
Right.
But it does get him out of there by the end of the season, which still fixes the overall. I mean, it's only been a handful of years. So, I mean, I know it's a bad look to leave him sit there for a whole season, but a whole season this time is 7 years instead of like 400 years.
Yeah, right. But that doesn't matter because it's the same to the viewer. It's the same amount of time.
I know.
Yeah.
I know that it's a whole season.
They can tell each other that people on the message boards will be telling each other, no, it's only been 7 years. It's not that big a deal. Why are you freaking out about this?
Right, but someone will.
But that's still the way it would be. Where,
like, forget about why he leaves. Where does he go? Where does he go?
Well, he ends up in Angband ultimately.
Yeah, but if we can't have him there when Beren and Luthien get there, and I think we really don't want him there, and he's not, I mean, that means we need a third place for him, like not Angband and not Hellevorn. And if so, where and why? And what implicate? I mean, I'm looking at the map, right, and I'm like, where can we send him? And we'd have to come up with a reason. Coming up with a reason is easier than coming up with a place to send him that's not going to mess up other places in the plot. We can't send him south because that makes obviously much, much worse the problem. We need Assyrian to be where the peaceful place. Yeah. So obviously he can't go south, right? We can't send him anywhere near Doriath because he's not part of the Doriath story, and we don't want to. Yeah, so we can't send him towards Doriath.
Can Sauron call him over to Dorthonion to help him wreck the place and turn it into Tarnafuin?
That's the only other thing that I was just going to suggest. Dorthonion, when Beren leaves, which is pretty early on, right? Dorthonion is now free ground. As far as like, we don't need it for anything. He can wreck the joint. He could live there. Yeah, he could turn it into Crazy Town because it's not yet been Crazy Town, right? In fact, that's a really interesting idea. The more I think about this, the more interesting this is, because later on, Tarnafuin, right? we're told later on that Tower Nufuin is this like psychotropic location, right? It's not just a dark and scary forest. It's a dark and scary forest with seriously psychotropic effects upon a person, right? I mean, it is Mirkwood.
It drives you crazy.
It drives you crazy. It drives you crazy. It is the original inspiration of Mirkwood. I mean, it like literally was Mirkwood. Tolkien used some of his drawings of Tower Nufuin to illustrate Mirkwood in The Hobbit. Like it's the same place in his mind, right? Like and Mirkwood always had that, like, not just dark, dangerous, and pathless, but like spooky and rivers that make you lose your mind, and the evil spiders and whatever. Tower Nufuin is described in these ways. We don't have, and Tolkien doesn't provide an origin story for Tower Nufuin, right? We know that Dorthonion used to be a reasonably nice place, right?
Well, it's supposed to be after Sauron flees from being defeated by Huan. So when Sauron hangs out there, it's supposed to turn it into Tower Nufuin. Now, he doesn't have a story with it, but...
Right.
The cause is meant to be Sauron.
Right.
Just like Mirkwood is the Necromancer.
The Necromancer, right, exactly. Yeah. Again, same place. Again, even arguably... There are places, John Ratliff argues in The History of the Hobbit that there are moments when it seems like in Tolkien's mind, Mirkwood was like literally Tower Nufuin, like it was actually the same place. But whatever. The point is, they were very closely tied. We weren't going to have Sauron hang out in Tower Nufuin for very long, if at all. Right, we had other jobs for it because we can't. What we don't want.
We're sending him east over the mountains.
We're sending him east. Tolkien can kind of vaguely send Sauron to Tower Nufuin and we not hear from him for a really long time, right? In the published Silmarillion, because in the published Silmarillion, or rather, at the time in which he was writing many of the texts that were collected into the latter half of the published Silmarillion, Sauron wasn't Sauron yet, exactly. So he wasn't... Tolkien did not feel himself to be under any obligation to keep track of him as a character in the same way that we do, because of the role that Sauron has in the film story as our closet main character throughout the entire show. Anyway, so we're doing something else with the anyway. Point is, we don't have an origin story for Tower Nufuin. There's a job to be done that Glaurung could be doing. I'm kind of a little bit liking this idea. We don't have to talk about it in this season. Like, we don't have to do it. We don't have to do Tower Nufuin in this season, right? But if we send him to Dorthonion, and then in season 7, we talk about Tower Nufuin at the beginning of season 7, right? All we have to do is have somebody be like, oh man, like, Dorthonion seriously gone downhill as a piece of real estate, right? Like Tower Nufuin, this place is, we could have somebody give it the name of Tower Nufuin, right? In the beginning of season 7. And we know that Glaurung was sent there. I don't know. I mean, if we don't, we kind of need to come up with another reason why Tower Nufuin becomes Crazy Town, right? Because we don't really have one of those. Origin story, for it. By whose power is Tower Nufuin? Does it make folks crazy when they go there?
Okay. So and this may be completely baseless, but my understanding has always been that it has to do with the border of Sauron's power versus Melian's.
Well, that's Nendon Gortheb.
Okay.
That's Nendon.
Yeah, but
Gortheb.
he's not. But well, okay. So we've basically changed that for all intents and purposes. See, the thing is, like, what would Glaurung be doing to make that happen?
He's known to poison things and to destroy them. So if he's poisoning the water and the land and the air and everything in the area that he's been traveling through, then he's creating this miasma of sickness over the whole land, I guess. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a thing that Tolkien did with him, but
no,
it's not completely outside of the realm of his character.
The other thing, I agree very strongly with that last statement. In fact, I'd go further. I mean, the effect that we see him having on people, like Nianor's amnesia, right? The way that he manipulates Turin, right? Glaurung has psychotropic effects on people, right? I mean, and so therefore there is a certain resonance between now again, like, what is the mechanism? Like, by what mechanism does he infuse like his spirit of malicious, crazy, like his malicious crazy making spirit into the region? I don't know, but I don't know, because I'm not like a big magic evil dragon, so I don't know his trade secrets, but it doesn't seem to me at all like a thing he wouldn't or couldn't do, and it does seem to fit with what we see him do to people. And it's not the same thing, but it's in the category of things.
So my issue is that Glaurung, whenever Glaurung does something to somebody mentally, it's always very targeted.
Yeah,
it's not like he doesn't do like an AOE. There's a befouling AOE, right? That he creates.
Sure.
So I feel like there's a separation there. Whereas Tower Nufuin feels like an ugly mirror of the Girdle of Melian, right? It seems like it's intentionally so.
Yes,
which feels a lot more like a Sauron thing.
Well, maybe. I mean, yeah, I can see that, but okay. So, I mean, I agree with you about his focused. I mean, yeah, like we see him exerting that power in the very focused ways, right? With Nianor, and Turin and such. But I mean, those are like just those specific examples, right? That doesn't mean he can't do more. Besides which, I would say this. Back to befouling, right? What does that mean? Remember Olmo's words to Tuor, right? Like, we hear from Olmo and through Olmo the power, his power is receding because it's been like what Glaurung does is more than just like when he defiles the things. It's more than dirt. It's more even than disease. There seems to me to be a greater power. Again, like almost suggests that his power is withdrawing from the land because of what Glaurung has done, and so that suggests to me that he has a pretty significant AOE potential there, right? And what if that's part of the goal, right? What if that's part of the goal? I mean, Olmo specifically. Olmo and Olmo's. I mean, look at the River Syrian, right? We know the River Syrian is really important to Olmo, right? And Olmo says that his like influence in the land is linked to the River Syrian, right? And the River Syrian, I mean, of course, there are like lots of rivers that lead into it, right? But Rivel's Well up here in Tower Nufuin is like the springs of Syrian, right? One of the springs. Again, there are all these other rivers that flow into it. But the sources of, but even the other rivers that flow into Sirion, right? The Mindeb, the Isgalduin, right? The northern branch of the river Aros here, right? They all come from Dorthonion. Anyway, what I'm suggesting is what he could be recalled to here, the job that Glaurung could be given, the Taur Nufuan crazy town, right, that people observe, could only be the visible tip of the iceberg of what Morgoth and Glaurung, with Glaurung as his instrument, what Morgoth's trying to accomplish here. Big picture, we could be looking at a chess match between Morgoth and Ulmo, whom Morgoth knows is the one who is primarily acting to oppose him, right? And Morgoth, we know, is distributing his spirit and expelling his spirit in order to and it's through Glaurung, very significantly, as well as others. And like, obviously, what I'm describing here, like this chess match with Ulmo concept, is not one where you're ever going to talk about on screen, right? But it's another. It makes sense to me. When I'm trying to ask the question, like, why does Taur Nufuan become, Taur Nufuan? Like, why does Dorthonion become Taur Nufuan? If it's not Sauron, because we're moving we're moving him along because we have another job for him, and he needs to get to it pretty quickly, right? If the Easterlings are going to be prepped to come across the mountains relatively early, like by the middle of the next season, he's got work to do over in the east. If we're going to make him do that, and I like that plan, then we need another reason why Dorthonion is going to become Taur Nufuan. And I think Glaurung, it works. It works. So first of all, Steve, how would a Maya level spirit be able to undermine a Vowel? Well, several answers to that question. Number one, it's not. It's the power of Morgoth. He would be but Morgoth's instrument in this.
A cog in the wheel.
Yeah. But secondly, it's not like almost like a secret agent here, right? This is not like Glaurung and Ulmo going toe to toe, right?
Right. If Glaurung has access to the sources of the river, then Glaurung can affect the river despite Ulmo's will in the situation.
Yeah, he's not arm wrestling Ulmo, right? The point is, the River Sirion is like the postern door through which Ulmo and his power are able to sneak into Beleriand and help to undermine Morgoth's cause. And Morgoth is like, we need to stop the leak. The River Sirion is a problem. The River Sirion is proving a problem, right? Because it's like, the River of Ulmo, and he's making himself a problem. Because we don't want to arm wrestle him, and we don't need to arm wrestle him, let's just screw up the River Sirion, right? And if we do that, then he himself will be weakened. He's over in Valinor, right? But his access to Beleriand is going to be thwarted. We're not going to let him carry on in this sneaky dream sending, messenger sending kind of way that he's been doing, right? So again, it's too simplistic to say that like they're fighting against Ulmo. It's not exactly what's happening here. What is the thing you dislike most about the idea of having Glaurung in Dorthonion, Nick? I can tell you're unhappy.
I mean, it's, you find ways to make this stuff work, obviously, but I think it just, like, why is Sauron suddenly teaming up with Glaurung? When does this happen? Like,
Sauron doesn't need
happen
to.
After? So Morgoth sends him into the area that he previously granted
Sauron's fiefdom, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So without now, of course, this could happen after Sauron's defeat
fall.
at the hands of Luthien, which makes a certain amount of sense, like, oh, well, you can't control it. But then that completely takes Sauron out of the Tower Nufuan equation.
Yes.
Right.
And actually, I quite like that. Here's why I quite like that. Because it suggests we were introducing at the very end of season 5 a split between Morgoth and Sauron, right? If we're starting season 6 with, I give unto, you take Tol Sirion, I give unto you Dorthonion to be your fiefdom. It looks like Sauron's in the captain's chair now, right? And he's making his move. We hope that the viewers will suspect that he's now kind of playing his own game instead of just being the good soldier that he always was before, right? But now he gets taken down by the elf girl and her dog, and now he's defeated. Now almost all of his captains are gone. No, all, without exception, of his captains are gone. Sheob doesn't count because she's a free agent. But anyway, Thuringwethel, Drugluin, Tevildo, who else? That's it, right? Am I forgetting one? I feel like I'm forgetting one. No? That's it. Anyway, they're all dead. His captains are all dead, right? So Sauron's posse is dead. He's been defeated. His great triumph of taking Tol Sirion has been semi-neutralized, right? I mean, the good guys don't take it back because it gets destroyed, but still, like, it's the stranglehold that he had over, the entrance into Beleriand is gone. Anyway, at that point, it would make all kinds of sense. And by showing Morgoth saying, okay, Glaurung, I need you to take over Dorthonion, it widens the gap, right? Now we see Morgoth saying, okay, maybe, Sauron's out. Sauron's out, Glaurung's in. And that helps to set up the Glaurung as Dragon King of Beleriand in season, 8 or whatever.
And I mean, that would be another example of Morgoth taking something of Sauron's away from him again.
Yes, again.
But
again.
My question then would be, how does Glaurung feel about all this? Because he is quite content and happy sitting on his pile of treasure in his little fortress of his own. If he wanted to be king of something, he would be king of Keep Helivorn.
Right.
So maybe this is when he develops the taste for having this leadership role rather than just being a weapon, right?
Yeah. He liked it. He would be pulled away reluctantly, but Morgoth clearly does not want Glaurung holding up, sleeping on that pile of treasure. I mean, as Timothy was suggesting on YouTube there, Morgoth needs the dragon to be out and about doing things, not sleeping on a big pile of treasure in literally the corner of nowhere, right? Right. Completely out of being a slight annoyance behind enemy lines for Maedhros' defensive purposes. But that's a small gain compared to what Glaurung could accomplish for Morgoth if he's actually, ambulatory. So, right. You can see why Morgoth would be like, stop playing around with your heap of treasure and get over here. But I do like that idea of like, and Glaurung never forgot the heap of treasure. And like, he's saying like, I shall obey, but one day I am going to get an even bigger and better pile of treasure, and doggone it, I am going to sit on that treasure. Like, this is when Glaurung's plan starts, where he was like, okay, now I liked that. I liked that. We've only seen him be a weapon. He's just been like a siege weapon to this point, right? But now he's like, okay, this is the good life, right? This is like not new 5-year plan for Glaurung, right? New vision for his future is to establish himself as king and get a big, sweet pile of treasure for himself, right?
So over the course of this season, Morgoth is going to cost himself both Sauron and Glaurung, both of whom were more or less loyal subjects when the season opened.
Yeah.
I think that.
Yeah. That's what bad guys do. Like, they're not good at. You can make it worse? Okay, make it worse.
Oh, yeah, I can make it worse. Okay, so check this out. So isn't there something about Tower Nufuan, like even the orcs don't want to go there? Right? But it seems counterproductive for Morgoth to put Glaurung there and for Glaurung to make it so that no soldiers want to be around there. But I can think of someone who might want to accomplish that goal and might want to do it underhandedly. Someone who might find themselves in the area more or less near Gondolin during the fall of Gondolin, who could accomplish a task that would resolve the tension between him and Gothmog, and that's Sauron. What if Sauron takes umbrage at this enough to start actively undermining the other underlings? Right? Now it's not just a rivalry with Gothmog. Now he's actively trying to undermine not Morgoth himself, but those that Sauron deems unworthy of the power, right?
Okay, so wait, are you suggesting Glaurung goes to Dorthonion and then Sauron goes to undermine him?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it just seems like the Sauron we've been building might take this, because we saw him kind of already starting to ideologically split with Morgoth, right? Mm-hmm. But the very least, at the beginning of this season, he is the only one that Morgoth can really depend on until he gets beat up by a little girl and her dog.
Yes.
Right? And then all that gets stripped away from him.
Yes.
Like, by the end of the season. But if he starts directly undermining people like Glaurung and then also undermining Gothmog, right? That allows us to start setting up the resolution of because he's eventually going to rise to the top, right? Even Morgoth isn't going to be there. He's going to be the Dark Lord eventually, right? And to start detailing that, I think might be really interesting.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand.
Think we have time or opportunity
not
to
in
do
this
anything.
season.
Not in this season.
Definitely not in this season, but even afterwards, because Sauron's going to have his own plot going on during the Nirnaeth, and so is Glaurung. Glaurung's not going to stay in Dorthonion through the Nirnaeth. So what you're talking about would have to happen in season 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sauron's really busy with Easterlings in season 7.
Right. So it would have to. I'm thinking, not even thinking of seasons, but thinking of storylines. Like, we need the first time we need Tower Nufuan to be Tower Nufuan is in the Turin story, right? The rescue of Turin and the death of Beleg, that's in Tower Nufuan when Tower Nufuan was Tower Nufuan, right? Like, that's the first time we need it to be what it will become. Honestly, the only time we actually need it, right? And we could use it in other times perhaps, but that's the only time we absolutely need it. So I agree with Marie that we need him over with the Easterlings, but once the Easterlings come over, after the battle, after the Nirnaeth, Sauron's at loose ends again.
Right.
Right. We need something for him to do between the Nirnaeth and the like the Second Age.
And at that point, right? Yes, undermining any other people who are his peers would be his goal. So yeah, at post Nirnaeth, that is a Sauron plan.
Yeah,
post Nirnaeth.
I was like, we can't do it pre Nirnaeth.
We can't do it pre Nirnaeth. Yeah, I agree. We have bigger things for him to do.
If he, in his mind at least, strikes the blow that wins the Nirnaeth, right?
With the Easterlings, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the treasure.
Right.
Yeah.
If he believes that he is solely responsible for their victory and he does not get recognized for that.
Right. Yeah.
Because he's fallen out of favor.
Gothmog can brag all he wants about killing Thingons, who's the High King. So
right.
Gothmog doesn't care that Sauron sweet talks some Easterlings into betraying people.
Right. And captured the mightiest human to ever exist ever.
Yes. I'm Sorry, I was just thinking of course, that wonderful line. Yet neither by wolf, nor by Balrog, nor by dragon would Morgoth have achieved his end, but for the treachery of men. And I'm imagining this like Sauron, like this big, huge fist pump, right? Like, yeah, you know it, right? Totally. And now Gothmog would, as you say, he has reason to brag, right? He could very well come out feeling very good about himself. Like, I killed the High King. I totally won the day. But Sauron knows that they probably still would have lost if it had not been for his thing. Morgoth probably knows that too, but that's going to be complicated now between him and Sauron, right? Anyway, no, yeah, that's true. Like it's a big deal. We probably could do Tower Nufuin. Here's my other thought, though. Nah. My other question was, what if we were talking about, of course, the other obvious job that Glaurung has to do, that he has to get himself to doing at some point, is begetting dragons, right? Like, you know, they don't the title Father of Dragons is not the title they, you know, give away, right? You've got to do something to earn that one, right? One thought I had was, what if Dorthonion becomes the place where the dragons grow up? What if that becomes the land of baby dragons, right? Remember, the dragons come over the mountains into Gondolin, right? When in the fall of... That's the first time we need a bunch more dragons, is in the fall of... I mean, we only need dragons in two more... other than Glaurung, right? In two spots. Right, we have to have dragons at the fall of Gondolin, and we have to have dragons, of course, at the last battle of the winged dragons. What if the non-winged offspring of Glaurung live in Dorthonion and therefore can be kind of whistled up? And I'm just now, I kind of like. I sort of like your Sauron in Tower Nufuin, like Sauron as like saboteur, right, in Tower Nufuin idea a lot, and the way in which the orcs themselves are afraid of it is kind of cool, like especially with Sauron's history with the orcs that we've made. It's like his animosity towards Gothmog and his resentment about what Morgoth did with the orcs is manifested in what he does to Tower Nufuin. And that to me seems like a really elegant point, and I like that. I was just kind of thinking it might be fun to have baby dragons around in Dorthonion, but
I was just thinking how horrifying it would be if what is causing the befoulment of the rivers is the breeding of new dragons.
Oh. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's got, like, Glaurung's an abomination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
surely...
filling the land with other abominations, and
through what unholy method I dare not ask.
No, we needn't show it.
Not something we have any intention of depicting on screen, so it's fine.
Exactly.
Leave that to the viewer's imagination.
Yes.
I don't. I'm already disturbed.
I have a friend who a friend who recently obtained a bearded dragon from, like, you know, buying a used baby dragon, as you do.
Like you do, right?
Exactly. It was put up for sale as a male bearded dragon, but the person who had it apparently doesn't know much about lizards. And so it definitely was obtained and this is clearly a female bearded dragon. And recently was x-rayed by the vet to determine, yep, there's definitely eggs inside.
So there we go. Yeah. We have yes, we could obtain pictures. That's an interesting idea. Because it's an interesting idea. One of the things I like about the idea, Nick, is, as you said, that idea of abomination, right? The offspring of Glaurung. This is not about, like, let's make it right, Steve. Exactly. We don't want adorable, cute baby dragons. That's not what I mean. No, of course, right?
It's horrified. I'll bet you they're slimy and gross.
I'm imagining, like, Rivel's Well becoming this, like, stinking, like, maggot-ridden, like, looking like a like the little, like, I don't know, larval dragons squirming around like maggots. Like, it basically, the idea though is that he's an abomination, and the abomination is spreading. Like, he is, and that, again, it seems to me, what I like about that.
That's why the orcs don't want to go there.
The orcs don't want to go there, but I don't want to lose the Taurenufuanishness of Taurenufuan either.
Yeah. But it's such an abomination that it starts to break reality. You know.
Well, and it becomes this, like, metaphysical thing, right? Like, to oppose the metaphysical influence of Ulmo, right? I mean,
it's like Cthulhu.
Well, it's unholy. Like, the River Sirion is the holy river in a sense to Ulmo, right? I mean, there's a sacredness about the River Sirion because of Ulmo. So how do you unsanctify a river? You don't dirty it. It's not even about disease. It's not even about poison, right?
The pools of Ivern definitely is put forth as a location that is imbued with power and characteristics associated with Ulmo, but
yes, it's a holy spot. Yeah.
Like, I know that Tolkien moved away from using words like Fane after he finished writing Lost Tales, but the pools of Ivern for sure is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it does. That's what I'm liking, Nick, about your abominable offspring of dragon idea, because it seems like a horrible but fitting counter to that, the kind of holiness, the kind of sacredness of Sirion to, and again, like, in a sense, that idea of holiness, that idea of sacredness, it's about in that idea of a sacred place, like the pools of Ivern. It's about, like, this is a spot where, the Valar, where, like, the holy ones make contact with that whole idea of sacredness is about the idea of, like, the transcendent making contact with, like, a touch point, right, between the transcendent and the physical. This is like an entry point for Ulmo into Beleriand. To reverse that, to oppose that, Morgoth would have a plan, right? And again, it's not rearranging the furniture. You don't just mess it up. You don't just pee in the water, right? Like, that's not what happened to the pools of Ivern. Is far worse than that, right?
I like that, and we can save Sauron as, like, underground nuisance for like Fall of Gondolin stuff, because I've been pushing for that for years now, that that I'd like to tie up the Glaurung, the Sauron Gothmog rivalry in a neat little bow, in some way.
Oh, with the death of Gothmog and Gondolin, you mean?
Oh yeah.
Quick question.
But we can work that out.
Quick question. If I know I'm thinking way down the road now, but it relates to what we're setting up here, so I might as well ask it. If we're imagining him returning to Sauron, returning to Dorthonion and to Taurenufuan, and we are okay with the idea, we do like the idea of the breeding ground of Glaurung being here and being connected with the fouling of the sources of Sirion, do we establish is Sauron going to, like, recruit the offspring of Glaurung into a new posse? Like, is he the one in charge of the dragons, or does he have sway over the dragons when they like? Does he do work there with the dragons there, or are they just separate there in Dorthonian?
Not necessarily, but we could use him to show that it's happening.
Because see, the other thing,
have him find Rivel's well, and I feel like he actually might be mortified,
right?
Even,
right. Yeah, like this is beyond. This is
wholly unnecessary.
Yeah,
like breaking reality is not.
This is not cricket. Like this is not okay. The other thing, of course, I'm thinking. As always, fun to play the long game, and I'm thinking about Smaug, right? Sauron, Smaug, potential alliance, right? So him having a history with dragons and established. I'm not saying he needs like a pet dragon, but if he's sitting there in
no more than Shelob is his pet, right?
Right.
An established working relationship of some sort.
Yeah. I'm just thinking if he's going to be sitting in Tower Nafuin, the baby dragons are going to be like a resource, near at hand to him. I don't know. I'm just, if we're going to go this way, we need to make sure we want them cohabitating, because he's going to have baby dragons in his backyard if he's going to set up in Tower Nafuin later on. So, okay. So Glaurung is going after the fall of Sauron. After the fall of Sauron, it can be right after the fall of Sauron, right? The news of the fall of Sauron comes to Morgoth, and he's like, great, right? Sauron's fired. Glaurung, get to Dorthonion, right? Like, we've got to consolidate this place. And in fact, Sauron was getting all distracted with his own little, like, necromantic plots. Go to Dorthonion and wreck the place. And when I say wreck the place, I mean wreck the place on a metaphysical level, right? Besides, P.S., I want more dragons, right? So let's make this happen.
I now kind of want the fell beasts to be undead dragons. I mean, that's a long gap.
Didn't see that coming. Didn't see that coming.
But yeah. Yeah, well, this would happen somewhere in the episode 8-9 range.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can afford to keep him in Lake Helivorn for a while. Again, if we just leave him there all season and then at the end we're like, oh, P.S. he leaves, that feels weird to me. But I mean, at the very least, if I'm Maedhros, dealing with the dragon is on my task list.
Yeah.
But I could forgive Maedhros for doing other things first, right? Yeah. To like first let's consolidate everything else that we have, right? Like because we're starting with just Himring. So like let's go and let's like I gotta try to get people together. Maybe he gets Caranthir and Amras together, right? And starts where, and he's like, where did Kelgorn and Corvin go, right?
He can make a passing mention of, like, if somebody brings up the dragon, which they should, he can make a passing mention of how their new allies, the dwarves, are working on something specifically to combat him, because they in fact do.
Right.
Well, honestly, if we have Morgoth handling the removal of the dragon from Keep Helivorn, I'm not sure that Maedhros ever needs to appear on screen this season. And, I mean, I'm not saying that because I don't like the guy.
Yes. So, I realize that's a self-sacrificial gesture on your part there, Marie.
It is.
Yeah. But I think you're wrong.
next season is obviously the Maedhros and Fingon show, and that'll be great. But I'm not sure we need to check in with Maedhros if we've dealt with the one problem that is in his territory without him being there. We might have a reason for him to be on screen with the Caligorm Currifin situation, either in the before or aftermath of that. But if not, like, we don't need him.
Right. Well, that I would argue that not showing him at all is weird.
Well, we're not going to show Fingon at all.
I don't
he's
know
the High King.
Yeah, but I'm not entirely comfortable with that either.
Right.
These are major characters in our story, and to leave them completely out in the cold while we tell the story of one brand new character we've just met and one kind of side character over there in Doriath, like, it just seems a little iffy.
Well, I mean, it's not like we need excuses to focus on Beren and Luthien.
Right. But yeah, I'm talking about for the viewer of the show, not for lover of Tolkien, right?
Sure.
But like, if there's no opportunity to put him in, that's not the end of the world. But I think that he does kind of because we have to answer the question of why Caligorm and Currifin don't go home. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons why we'd want to at least have something from him, and so that we know what the status of East Beleriand is.
Oh, we can definitely talk about East Beleriand, and I'm fine with characters talking about what Fingon's up to or what Mithras is up to. I'm just saying, do we need to actually set a scene in East Beleriand? And unless we have a dwarf storyline over there, it's looking like the answer to that is no right now.
I do like the setup with Glaurung, especially because we do have, like, the dwarves have been working on anti-dragon technology, right? With the dwarf masks, which are going to enable them to fight off Glaurung in the Near-Knife.
Right. So we could show the dwarves trying to get the dragon out and not getting anywhere with it, and then later having Morgoth recall him anyway.
By the way, you know that's going to would be all kinds of awkward if the dwarves evicted, because you know what would happen if the dwarves evicted Glaurung?
They'd be like, "Oh, Caranthir, what treasure? You said there was treasure here?"
No, they're like, yeah, there's treasure here, and it's our treasure now. Like,
it's our tower now. No more toll road.
Yeah. I'm gonna put a Thorin-esque barrier in front of the door and be like, this be our treasure now. Yeah, I mean, like, there's no way that ends well for Caranthir and his relationship with the dwarves if the dwarves manage to. I mean,
now
indeed,
I kind of really want that.
I know, right? I mean, it's and again, even when Glaurung leaves, who's the first one on site? You know.
So the dwarves were trying to evict the dragon, but the dragon is staying put. Then Morgoth recalls the dragon and sends him to Dorothonian. The dwarves immediately move into the tower because they were, like, camped out.
Of course they would.
The dragon.
Yeah.
So now we have a situation where Caranthir would like his tower back, and the dwarves are like, "You mean our tower?"
Exactly. I mean, how could that not happen? Like, what alternative could there possibly be? The dwarves aren't going to be like, "Oh, we're just holding it for you, man. Like, it's all, you can have all your stuff back." Like, no, they wouldn't say that, especially given the tensions with the way he treated them before. Like, they're, it's not like they're so loving and grateful towards him that they're going to be like, "Man, this totally belongs to you. We can't possibly." No, they're going to claim it.
But they might come to some sort of agreement that he could have most of the treasure back.
Most of the treasure.
In return for joint control of Keep Helivorn moving forward. And I feel like Mithras greenlights that immediately.
Right.
Caranthir is like, "These guys, they have such nerve." And he's like, "They want what?" "Yeah, no, that's done. We're doing that."
Right. And no more tolls, and I think, I mean, they would have one heck of a bargaining position if they are squatting in Keep Helivorn on all of Caranthir's treasure, from which they would be deducting all of the tolls that they paid previously.
Protection.
Right? Yeah, it's like we're retroactively undoing the tolls that we've been paying for several generations of dwarves.
Since we drove off the dragon.
Exactly.
With our mere
exactly. Because here we are.
nearness.
Right. We've been working on this, and now the dragon has got what was Carnthier going to prove they didn't drive him off? Like, how does he know? Right?
It was their continued pressure.
Exactly.
The dragon knew they would eventually come back in greater numbers and destroy them.
Absolutely.
They might actually believe that.
Yeah. I mean, they scared him off, obviously. Like, they when it came to it, he wouldn't even face them, right? By the way, can't you see Azekal taunting Glaurung with that? That would be actually really kind of a funny scene, where Azekal is like, do you dare even to face us this time, Glaurung? Or are you going to run away again? And Glaurung's like, wait, who are you? Like, when did this happen? Anyway, yeah, like that would be kind of fun. No, I love that. Here's our dwarf plot. No problem.
Here we go.
No problem.
Oh, well, that's the dwarves of Belagast in East Beleriand.
Yeah.
There's other dwarves in this story.
Yeah, it's true. So there are several possible answers to Steve's question about how does one of the dwarf masks wind up in Nargothrond for Turin to find. And there are several ways. I mean, I don't know that we need to even handle that in this season. There's room for that to happen next season.
The Nirnaeth is going to involve a lot of troop movements.
A lot of things coming together and then scattering afterwards. So that would be easy enough for somebody just has to bring it home from the Nirnaeth, basically. So that shouldn't be that hard. Yeah. So anyway, kind of loving this. I like the connection between the dwarves and Glaurung. Like we building that is good.
It seems so like them to do that.
Absolutely.
Like we have all the evidence we need that they would 100% do that.
And they're probably not going to really think that they can hold Keep Hellborn against, like, if they were just to defy Carnthier entirely, right? They couldn't stand against his army and Maedhros' army and everybody else, right?
Right, but they're in a very good bargaining position because they know that Maedhros needs them.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they're not gonna. They're incentivized against just like holding up and declaring war against Maedhros and company, right? Because that's not really a winnable situation for them, and I'm not even sure how much they'd want it, right? I mean, like, it's a, like, it's a keep and everything.
Yeah, they might not be real big fans of Carnthier, but that doesn't mean that they equate him to Morgoth and Angband.
No,
like, the dwarves are pretty clear on who they actually want to fight here.
Right. Well, and also, I'm just saying, Carnthier or like Keep Hellborn is like it's not necessarily a real desirable piece of real estate anyway. I mean, it's all above ground and everything, and
Here's the way it happens. Carnthier doesn't show up at Keep Hellborn.
Yeah.
The dwarves take possession of Keep Hellborn, and then they send Maedhros a letter, and Maedhros summons Carnthier and reads out the letter, and Carnthier is like, "Well, we'll show them," and Maedhros is like, "No, actually, this seems super reasonable, and I think it's great."
And Caranthir's standing is rather decreased since the last time.
Almost all of his dudes are dead.
Almost all of his dudes are dead. His own, seriously, did not cover himself with glory in the battle, and especially the aftermath with Glaurung himself, right? Especially if Amros is there, who was there with him, right? I mean, it's, so, the kind of sort of humiliation of Carnthier that comes along with this is not unpleasant with this storyline. I mean, kind of liking that element of it. The dwarves getting their own back seems fun. Establishing the establishing the connection with the dwarves and Glaurung, like it. So yeah, it's okay, so let's do that. Okay, so time-wise, thinking of the time, Glaurung gets recalled. When does he get recalled? He gets recalled after Sauron's defeat. Yeah. Right, so Sauron gets defeated middle of the season. So 8 or 9, Glaurung gets called to Dorthonion, right, to start making with the begetting in Dorthonion. And then that's the point where the dwarves are like, yay, free treasure packed castle. Right? This is the best day ever. Right?
A little stinky.
Right, exactly right. Needs to be aired out, but you know what? We can work with this. And they send the message to Maedhros.
Yeah, and so then that whole thing playing out with Amras and Caranthir more or less corresponds with the time that Celegorm and Curfin are going to try and come home.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah,
so we can work it into that part of the storyline, so we have it all happening in the same episode. And
that's true. So we get one Feanorian episode. In fact, we could even like follow Celegorm and Curufin home, and then have it happen after the Leap of Beren. Right, exactly. Yeah. So they limp themselves home, only to find the dwarf messenger arriving. You know, with the demands. Yes. Agreed. And them being all like, hey, Celegorm, where's your dog? And him being like, I don't want to talk about it. Speaking of which, that last one, I've been overlooking your last point there. The Prophecy of Huan. We did make it Glaurung. Who overheard that? How does that get out?
Well, it gets out off screen. He tells them back at home.
Glaurung wasn't talking on screen in the episode in which it happened. So we didn't see him tell anyone or anything like that. And if he's getting recalled right after the defeat of Sauron, that is right about the time that Carcharoth ends up being the guard dog of the Gates of Angband. So if we're going to show the conversation where Morgoth tells him to go to Dorthonion, we could have an oblique reference to it in there somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Sauron has to know about it sooner. And it's also true that Leap of Beren and stuff is after, isn't it? After the fall of Sauron?
Yeah.
So we do need to... But we can... There's time, right? I mean, if Glaurung is recalled around episode 8 or 9, it doesn't have to be until episode... I don't know where the Beren and Luthien events map yet exactly. But I think we could have a little bit of time in there. Yeah. It's going to be tight, but we're going to have to. It's going to be challenging.
We only have to have somebody kind of passingly mention it, because the near confrontation between Draugluin and Huan at the Dagor Bragollach kind of suggests that Draugluin knows.
Right.
We have to remind the audience anyway, because it was a passing remark made 3 years ago, right? Or however long it's been. And so we kind of have to have somebody mention it, and having one of the bad guys mention it to somebody, like maybe having somebody mention it to Gorbal, because I 100% believe that Gorbal hasn't heard that. Right. And then it's not a, as you know, conversation, which I am well known for hating. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Leap of Beren confrontation with Celegorm and Curufin is likely going to be in the episode immediately after the defeat of Sauron. So if we are defeating Sauron in episode 7, then episode 8 would be Leap of Beren stuff.
Yeah, it's gotta be. Well, we'll worry about this when we get to the Beren and Luthien story. I'm a little. That's the part of the timeline that troubles me most, honestly, because once we get to the fall of Sauron, there's so much, right? I mean, there's so much. We've got to save room. Angband, back in Doriath, hunting Karkaroth, over to Mandos. These are huge things that we need. We can't short shrift them for the sake of the Leap of Beren. You know what I mean? Like yeah. So maybe we got time. We'll see. I'm not sure, but so I'm not gonna worry about it too much right now. But suffice to say, I think that timeline would work. It would work because we don't have to have a dwarf demand arriving to Maedhros prior to like episode 10 or something. I mean, it could happen pretty late in the season. There's really no necessary reason why it would have to happen early. In fact, there's no timing needed for it. Like, it doesn't have to happen before anything else. It can happen, it's the end. So, hey, you know what I'm noticing? We didn't do the next slide, but we did the one after that accidentally. So let's actually, I wasn't going to talk about this tonight, but let's finish this since we've been talking about the dwarf stuff.
Go Dwarves.
Go Dwarves. Let's go Dwarves. Okay. The Nauglamir, that's one of the things I was coming back around to. And this, Maria, is what you were hinting at when you were talking about Belagost and Nogrod, right? Because the Nauglamir is a Nogrod product. Okay. So I was also thinking, by the way, this is the other logical way in which we can get a dwarf mask down to Nargothrond on a pilgrimage, basically. Like, it can be given as a gift by a dwarf who comes down in pilgrimage. Even if the Nauglamir is a Nogrod thing, that doesn't mean the dwarves of Belagost aren't going to appreciate it, right? I mean, if this thing is a little bit parallel to the Silmarils from a dwarf perspective, then the dwarves of Belagost are going to admire it also, right? Maybe not to the same extent, but it would still be something that there would be some Belagostian dwarf who would be interested in seeing. Anyway, it's possible. Are we still thinking of doing a pilgrimage scene in Nargothrond?
There are a couple of ways to handle this. One is to have a scene with Finrod early in episode 1, where part of the backdrop of the scene is receiving the Nauglamir, and then you can have the dwarves show up later to on a pilgrimage to see it when our main story is now in Nargothrond. The problem is, I'm concerned that at this point it may be too late to try to imbue the Nauglamir with the kind of weight that we're looking to do. Because it kind of feels a little bit like we're introducing it and telling the audience, hey, by the way, this is super important.
Right.
When they've never had any chance to develop any kind of attachment to that.
Okay,
but if not now, then when?
Well, right.
Well.
So here's the deal. We need to have the Nauglamir on screen now because Finrod's about to be dead. But
we're running out of time.
Yeah. Only if we're going to keep it as Finrod's thing, I know. But my point is, that was our original plan, was to make it Finrod's thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So if we wanted
kept kicking the can on it.
I know.
But we do at least have a Nargothrond plot. We're going to be organically in Nargothrond in this season.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing is, if we want to keep the pilgrimage idea, that could be a later development after the death of Finrod, because Orodreth can keep the Noglamir in Nargothrond in a place of honor. We're going to be in Nargothrond in the Turin storyline, obviously, and we're going to want to reintroduce the Noglamir to the audience at that point. So if we want to have a Dwarven pilgrimage to Nargothrond in Turin's time, we could just establish Finrod with the Noglamir in this time, and then it will have had time to develop that mythic quality. Okay. Whereas I kind of agree that if we're like, hey, I got this brand new necklace, and like 2 episodes later, and now there's like caravans of dwarves coming to see my brand new necklace, you're like, how'd that happen?
Right.
That was really fast.
I like that idea. Like that passage of time seems fitting. If we introduce it as this is the, I mean, we could add it to the not the abdication scene itself.
The part where he throws his crown down and
the departure.
It's given to Orodreth.
He gives it to Orodreth. Yeah.
Right.
And Orodreth is like, I'm going to keep this and take special good care of it, right? And he, and no doubt, like, you know, Curufin wants it, right? And Orodreth can keep it from him, so we can sort of show it be potential. We'll talk about that. We'll get to the Nargothrond stuff in
but it can play. The necklace itself can play a role in the power politics of Nargothrond that we're working out between Finrod, Orodreth, Curufin,
and in some ways, Nick, this is the perfect time to introduce the Noglamir if we are using it in this way to associate with like the power, memory, and splendor of Finrod, introducing it at the end when Finrod leaves, and therefore imbuing it with the specialness of like, the greatness of Finrod that was, right? If that's associated with the Noglamir from the start, then it's already special in that way, right? We're making it special by having, so I mean, basically we start off with Finrod's got his new necklace, right? So, you know, and we have to have that as a, you know, conversation between him and Orodreth, right? You know, Beren comes in and he's like, hey, dude, see my sweet new necklace, right? Like, anyway, like we establish it as, but it's not just a sweet new necklace, right? This is not just Finrod being like, I have upgraded my bling in a very serious way, right? This is Finrod, it would be symbolic, right? What is the Noglamir? The Noglamir is made of the gems that he brought from Valinor. Right. So it would be for Finrod invested with meaning in like his own connection. Like it would, for him, it would be like his memory back to his, know, to his time in Valinor, to his girlfriend who's still like there. And
he used to wear that he gave away. Dad. And it was connection to Valinor, but then he gave it away at the end of the Dagger of Bragollach because, you know, someone saved his life. So he needed to take his remaining jewels and put them in a necklace. And that's why he had the necklace made right now.
Well, okay. So I have a quick question. Because as I recall, there was an intention to make it some sort of great ancestral thing that the dwarves had made rather than a commission that Finrod orders right now. And one way that I think that could be done is if they tell him that it was made by jewels that he gave them when he first established Nargothrond.
We did show him gifting jewels in that scene to the dwarves who helped build Nargothrond.
Right, because then it could have already been around for a while at that point before they give it to him.
But
our goal isn't to make it old at the beginning. It
doesn't need to be old.
Is that the smith who makes it now will be old by the time Thingol's messing around with it.
Right. Okay. And it would undermine it a little bit. If Finrod has it as a hand-me-down, then I like this idea of us. I think it helps us to give it significance, even like emotional significance to the viewer, if it's connected with Finrod, who's gonna die. Like Finrod's been a big deal. You know, he was one of the central characters of the last season, and he's gonna die very dramatically in the middle of the center point of this season. And so the Noglamir, we can position the Noglamir to be like, remember Finrod, right? When you see the Noglamir, that's what Orodreth is going to be doing, right? Orodreth is going to set it up in a little like Finrod shrine. Afterwards.
He's oh my gosh, he's Sam in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. when he puts the
right.
instead of taking up the shield,
he puts it in exactly. He puts it in a museum. Yeah.
And he
exactly.
he keeps going back to the museum, looking at it and go, well, not before it gets given to somebody else, but he goes back to the museum. He's looking, he's like, but right. I do have a question, and that is, does Finrod wear the Nauglamir?
Yeah.
So
do you recall that Thingol kind of had something to say about the Noldor
we did the
jewels.
jewel thing. Yeah, it's awkward.
Now he banned speaking Quenya as well, and we did incorporate that. So if you consider that Finrod can't do this, but then the question is, does Finrod still care about Thingol's ban at this point in the story? Because it's been hundreds of years.
Also, like that.
And Thingol didn't show up for the Dagger Bridalock.
Yeah, and all of the Noldor have kind of done this, like, look, we're gonna go along with the ban, but like that doesn't mean like he can't control what we do at home, Like when we all get together, we're not gonna be rude, right? We're all gonna speak Sindarin, and we're not gonna wear our gems to council meetings and stuff. But like, does that mean that I can't like wear my own crown in my own throne room? Like, forget you, Thingol. Like, you're not the boss of me. Obviously, the Feanorians were saying that, and more than that from the beginning, right? But even Finrod, like again, when he's home in the privacy of his own room, is he not going to put on his own bling if he wants to put on his own bling? Like, what's Thingol got to say about that?
So his interpretation is, when I go to Doriath, I don't bring the Nauglamir with me.
Yeah, absolutely not. Which is deliciously ironic, right? Of course. Yeah, exactly. We want to make sure the Nauglamir doesn't end up in Doriath, obviously. Exactly. But
this is why Thingol thinks he has a right to it, because it was because Finrod shouldn't. It's Finrod's forfeit for breaking.
He shouldn't have had it. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, because since I banned these and you had it anyway, that means I get it. Yeah,
it's mine. It's a fine.
It's a fine. It's a fine. I had forgotten completely about that Jules angle that we introduced there. But yeah, it's still going. It can still. He doesn't have to wear it all the time. Do I kind of feel like we should see him in it? Yeah, I kind of feel like we should see him in it. But that doesn't mean we have to have him constantly wearing it all the time. Because I think its significance to him would not be as personal ornament. It would be as like memory of what was. What should it look like, the Nauglamir? I hadn't thought of it in these terms before. If we think of it as like it is to him, because I'm thinking forward to Finrod's song battle, right? And his part of the song battle and his singing of Valinor and what he does, right? Like his song that he sings against Sauron, that's like what the Nauglamir mean. Like if you were to ask me what should the Nauglamir mean to him, I would that's where I would go. I would go to his Valinor song. So there should be, I'm not sure what it means as far as what it looks like, but there should be a connection there. Anyway, visually, I don't know how.
We would have had a lot of examples of Noldoran jewelry up to this point. So the fact that this one's Dwarven made, there should be something different about it. But if it recalls some elements of the Noldor designs, then
right. Of Tyrion or yeah.
Oh, what if it recalls Mirror, like in the reverse, like whatever Mirror looks like when you look into it, right? The stars of that.
The stars, yeah.
Reflect out of Mirror.
Crown of Durin
could look like the reverse of that.
I'm trying to think
instead of up here.
What do you mean by reverse?
Instead of it being
flipping, instead of the crown over Durin's head,
it's a mirror up.
It's right. Okay, I see. Mirror. So okay, right.
So an uneven
it's a mirror,
placement
mirror,
of-
mirror.
It's a mirror.
an uneven placement of jewels to recall a constellation.
Yeah.
Specifically the Sickle of the Valar.
Well, I was gonna say yes.
Yeah.
I mean that Finrod would be into that, right? I mean he'd be into a constellation themed necklace, right?
Yeah. And
That's very
okay. So
it's also very Valinorian.
Think about the Sickle of the Valar, right? Because it's the Big Dipper, and so you have the curvature and the bowl, right? And the Silmaril could rest underneath the curvature, so it would be this really interesting asymmetrical thing once it's done.
Yeah,
I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that a lot. I like that the connection with the I hadn't thought at all about that, the mirror connection. That's really interesting. The Durin's crown thing. Now, of course, these aren't Longbeards, right?
Right, but Durin is still held in high esteem by all of them.
Still a big deal. Yeah, still a big deal. Especially if, I mean, I'm imagining, what's his name? I forgot. The Smith.
Zirak, young Zirak.
Yeah, Zirak.
Who will become old Zirak.
Old Zirak, right. Yes, feisty young Zirak here is going to be... you can kind of see the link, right? Like I'm making a necklace for one of the Eldar, right? For one of the Children of the Stars, and what they like stars. So I'm thinking Durin's crown. Okay, wait, Durin's crown, right? Let's do a Durin's crown. Yeah, I mean it's one can see how that comes through,
and it certainly adds to the mythic nature of it to the dwarves.
Yeah.
Like that's part of why it has an almost religious significance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's cool, and that because and it certainly offers a premise for their demanding of it later on, right? I mean, it's not a legitimate premise, but it's they're going to need some excuses, and that's a good one, right? This is a holy relic of the dwarves. Here's why, right? I like that. Okay. And the pilgrimage, it's having been established as a pilgrimage site for later on is fine. I see Steve was concerned that Nargothrond is closed by Turin's time. It's okay. But there will be plenty of time for there to have been pilgrimages between when we see it now and when we see it later on. All we need is a shrine that has that is like now a little Finrod museum, with other stuff. So.
Yeah, but he does make a good point, though, that the speech that Curfin gives right before Finrod leaves is what makes Nargothrond go into full lockdown forever.
Yes.
Until Turin. So that does kind of clash with an idea of pilgrimages of dwarves coming, unless we show it during the time that Turin's there. And a remark is made about how long it's been since pilgrims have been able to visit it. Also, what's his face? Meme could have something to say about how dwarves used to come across the mountains for miles and days and months to journey to see the Mount Lemire. When what's his face when Hurin kills him.
We haven't done anything with the no longer petty dwarves in a long time.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Let's continue to do nothing with them.
I was just pointing out that I kind of have a vague memory that we sort of wanted to not come back to the petty dwarves until the Turin story, the unpetty dwarves, until Turin's time. What did we decide to call them? I know we disliked petty dwarves in the end, but. That word has just changed too much.
There were several. I think there was something they called themselves, and there was something that the other dwarves called them, and so.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Something about exile and
I also
being without a country, and
they
were houseless or something like that.
The houseless dwarves, yeah, that's
something
right.
like that.
That's right. Yeah. At some point, we should encounter them again before Turin runs into Meme, so that anyway, okay. just remembering an uncomfortable thing there for a moment.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But okay, but that's fine. Okay, all right. No, this will work. This will work. We can establish that. So, the two dwarvish impacts on the plot line during this season will be in the first handful of episodes, like somewhere in episodes 1 through 4, presumably, we get Finrod and the Nauglamir. And then, which is good, by the way. Like, it's good to have a reason to reestablish Finrod prior to Beren showing up, right?
Yes.
With Finrod. So that's a very, so that when Beren leaves Doriath and is like, Plan A, Finrod in Nargothrond, right? We will have just been touching base with Finrod comparatively recently. And remembering, also taking that opportunity to recall Finrod's connection with Tol Sirion, which is now Towering Garhoth, right? So that's another thing we need before Finrod and Beren get there, right? So yeah. That manages all that. And then we have the Dwarves of Belagast and the Windfall at Hellevorn. And yeah, I think that's enough dwarf storyline for this season. Yeah, that's very cool. So we skipped Thingol entirely. But that's okay. Let me just end by kind of addressing I don't even know what to say about, so we decided not to do the battle last time, and I know that decision has been unpopular with many people on the board. The primary thing that I feel the need to address it, right, for that reason, and then we can come back and talk more about Thingol stuff next time. But I guess what I would just want to say about that is I totally understand and respect the desire to have Thingol, to maintain Thingol's status, I think that's really important. But I think that having him win a battle would not anyway have accomplished what we need to accomplish with his character, right? He will triumph. Thingol will have a triumph, which will keep him just from being jerk-faced from one end to the next of this. Like, I agree. We certainly want to guard against Thingol becoming a kind of a caricature, like lame bad guy character right away, right? But his triumph is his acceptance of Beren later on, like his personal character growth. From what he does, ignoring Melian, doing the, cunning counsel that he applies to the Beren situation. That's fine, right? Like that's, he's going to come down there, right? And he's been a mixed character already to this point, right? But he's going to recover. Right? I mean, he's going to end the season strong. Yes. He has a real upward arc, and it has nothing to do with military prowess. And indeed, right. I think military prowess would be utterly irrelevant to the character growth that we're really going to see in him. It's when he accepts Beren and marries the two of them, right? I see him like conducting the marriage ceremony himself between Beren and Luthien, right? After they return.
Treatment of Turin is super redeeming. Yes, we see this is not just a flash in the pan, right? Right.
He's turning over a new leaf. This is him turning over a new leaf, right? And we'll see that continue all the way through the Turin story.
But let's not forget, this is also the same guy who suffers from death by monologue, right?
Right. He came down with a terminal case of monologue at the
let's
end there.
not lose sight of the fact that that's where we're ending up. So if he's got some ups and downs, even some significant ones, I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah,
because he's got to get to there.
He does, and I think that it will still be enough. He's a long running character, and he's been from the beginning a great. We've never lessened him, right? Sometimes he acts like a jerk, but we've never made him a little character, right? We've never made, he's always had greatness, he's always had power, he's always had significance. He's never been weak. He's sometimes a jerk, but he's never been weak, right? And we will see him gain a moral strength over the course of this season, which he will maintain into coming seasons. So he's going to be, and that will mean then his fall with the Silmaril and the dwarves is going to be the more tragic, right? Because Thingol will have been trending in a very positive direction, really for quite some time. Before then, I mean, his time with Turin is ultimately, and Morrowind and Neonor is ultimately frustrating, right? I mean, he fails to do the good that he's trying to do, but he's consistently trying to do the good, right? So yeah, I think in the thing that I would urge is that is his story. Like, that is the story of Thingol in this season, and it would be his story even if he were in a battle. So that's exactly why I don't think that, it's not because I don't want people to think that our choice to not give him a battle has anything to do with our not caring about like his stature or, his kind of standing with the viewers, but rather our desire to increase his standing in exactly the way that it's going to be very important for him to have it as we move forward. And Steve, we have shown Thingol in combat. We saw him as a triumphant battle leader back in season 3. It was a while ago, but again, he's had a long career, and he's been many things, right? He has been ambassador. He has been, one of the leaders of the march across. He's been the dude who married up in the biggest way in Tolkien's corpus. He has been the leader of all of the Sindar. And he's triumphant in battle, saving the Green Elves. There's lots of things that we have shown him doing. So yeah, I mean, he's got that on his resume. We've established that. Even though I would add, I don't know that we'd even if we hadn't, I don't think we would need it now. Like, warrior king is not really a prominent line on his resume, Thingol, so that's not a credential he needs to buff up in this season, really. That's just not his bag, but anyway, it's and that's like, that doesn't lessen him. It doesn't make him something he's not. That's not who Thingol is. But anyway, in as much as he needs it, he's got it. He's already established that. Anyway, it was a while ago, admittedly, right? 3 seasons prior to this. But again, it just, the kind of strength of character or whatever, like the kind of stature that winning a battle would gain for him is ultimately, it seems to me, a kind of stature almost wholly irrelevant to what his real battle is in this season. And his real battle is he going to accept Beren? Is he going to, his relationship with his daughter, his relationship with Beren, which ultimately maps onto his relationship with humans as a whole, as we'll see in the Turin story, right? I mean, it's, that's the big fight that he has to fight, and he loses the first battle, right? When his daughter brings home the boyfriend, that he does not cover himself in glory there. Though I loved the comment on the boards that who was it who was testifying as the father of a 15-year-old daughter? Yes, Octoburn, exactly. I love that. Having a 15-year-old daughter myself, I can relate to going from pretty good dad to jerk when your daughter walks in with someone that you don't approve of. And yeah, like, you know, his failure even, like, it's a, you can relate, you know, like it's definitely something that's, you know, you can, I mean, even Mellion's response, right? O king, you have devised cunning counsel, right? Like, I see what you did there, and I understand why you did it, but, like, you know, anyway, that's, you know, I don't think you really thought this through. And again, like, that's, I can see that, right? I can feel him there.
I swear to never send any of my daughter's boyfriends on a suicidal quest.
Look, don't make rash vows, man.
Yeah.
Don't make promises you can't keep. That's my advice.
To face the devil.
Right. It's never say never, man, is all I'm saying.
I mean,
like,
I feel like
these situations catch us by surprise sometimes. That's all I'm saying. You never know, right? You just never know. It's easy to say now. Your daughter's how old? Come on, like, you know,
I mean,
it's
yeah. But
we'll
at the same point, like, I feel like what he did shows remarkable restraint in a way, because some of us might have just, you know,
right. Yeah, no, there's right, yeah.
There were 0 shotguns involved in Thingol's response to the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's and this is this is why I want Thingol presiding at the wedding. You know, like at the end, like he wins, right? This is victory, and again, and I'm just thinking what this means. The scene that we get in one sentence in the text. When Luthien returns and heals the winter of things, like, oh my goodness, like, that has to be such a powerful scene, right? That's the closure of the loop, right? The end of the Thingol story in this season comes when Luthien revives him, you know, from his despair after Luthien's death, right? After Luthien and Beren die. Like that, oh my goodness, like, that's going to be such a powerful scene. And one of the main reasons why I'm really worried about things like the Leap of Beren and the fight with Celegorm and Curufin, because as much as I want to do that scene, even less do I want to shortchange these other things, including things which are shortchanged in the text, right? Like, we just don't get them much in the text, and there's so much more that could be done with those. As we knew, Tolkien did start writing, did not ever finish many much longer versions of the Beren and Luthien story because, you know, it was really quick. This is, yeah, sorry. I don't want to complain. Never complain about what Christopher Tolkien didn't give us because it's just ungrateful. And, you know, like, it's just ungrateful. However, I was kind of hoping for that with the Beren and Luthien book. Like, would it have done any harm?
On the other,
but anyway,
with
whatever.
Silm Film Project, we get to fill in all the gaps ourselves.
There we go.
And we might not do as awesome of a job as could have been if the original existed. But we never have to worry about, like, oh man, if only that piece of the story were here. We just have to make it up.
That's it. That's the fun of all of this. So anyway, so that was me not talking about Thingol for a while. Hang on. Wait, what else do we have to say, though, about him? I guess there are a couple things we can finish up with him.
We can lump it in with the Nargothrond discussion.
It can.
Most
Yeah,
of what we still have to discuss about him is what does he do while his daughter is away, which partially she's in Nargothrond.
Partially she's in Nargothrond, and he's going to be preoccupied with that. So, with that is the whole Nargothrondian situation with Celegorm. Yes. Yeah, we talked about how he reconciles with Beren and Luthien after the quest. Man, like that scene, like there's so many powerful scenes, right? But that, like, you know, that Beren, like, here's the Silmaril, you know, like, and he holds up his stump, right? Oh man, like, and like in the heart of Thingol melting, and oh man, like, that's such a powerful scene. Yeah, and so good. So yeah, we'll talk about. We can lump in the question of basically what did Thingol do when Luthien's away. Maybe we come back to Dairon in that context also. We need to figure out what happened with... I don't want Dairon to vanish in one paragraph. Again, we can still get rid of him, but we need to do a little bit more with I'd like poor Dairon to get a little bit more plot line. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so this didn't go quite according to plan. But for next time, so I said, so here's what we're going to do. So for next time, let me go backwards again. Next, we're gonna answer the last Thingol questions in the context of talking about Nargothrond, right? So maybe we'll do Nargothrond, then we'll come back to, let's do that. Let's do Nargothrond, and then we'll come back to Thingol and Dairon as well, right, afterwards, in the context of what we decide about Nargothrond, right? So we need to iron out the Kelgorm and Curufin story and how we're going to do that and how much we're going to do with all that. And especially in the light of like changes we've made to Orodreth's character and stuff like that. We need to figure out how that's going to look. And not to mention the additions we've done to things like Celebrimbor's character, right? The relationship between Celebrimbor and Orodreth that we've already built, right? That has to pay off, right? So we need to figure out that stuff. Then we'll return to Thingol and Dairon, and then we will think about, we'll be close to the story of Beren and Luthien, but not quite. I still want to think about magic. A question that we have had for a long time, like since the beginning of the Film project, in a sense, is how are we going to, like when people are doing magic, doing magical stuff, how do we show that? Like, what do we show on screen? Like, how do we handle people like to joke about, characterizing Finrod and Sauron as having a rap battle, but like, for real, what does it look like? They're singing their songs. What do we show on the screen when they're standing there singing their songs? Like, how do we, Luthien does her thing, makes her hair grow, makes her cloak like that. So what do we show when people are doing, she puts everybody to sleep? Like, this is the limit. Like, we've put off talking about that because we've been able to avoid, we've never really had times when people are like, I am doing something magical on screen right now. Like, that's almost never happened in any of the stories that we've told. We've been able to avoid that. There have been a couple exceptions, but notice how we got around those times. Like, one of the big examples that we have had in the past has been at the Merethathad, right? Mm-hmm. But we got around that by making the effects of that almost purely spiritual and psychological, right? We didn't have to show much. Anyway, point is, I want to make sure we know how we're going to handle the special effects in this season. What are we going to do for special effects? How much special effects do we need? What are we, we have a lot of people. This season we have people all over the place doing magic, doing necromancy, doing casting spells over people. Like, what else are you doing when you're putting all of Angband to sleep, if not casting a spell, right? We have magical hair growth. We have magic cloaks of 2 different varieties. We have all kinds of things like that going on, right? How do we handle that? What do we want to do and not do? So we're gonna touch on that, because I know if we don't touch on that first, I'm gonna get all distracted in the middle of the Beren and Luthien story talking about that. So we're gonna clear that out of the way, and then we'll get to Beren and Luthien. So that's a look ahead at what's coming in the next few sessions. So just so that you can start thinking about that and talking about those things on the discussion board. Our next session will be on February 24th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We should be on schedule here for this next one, and yeah, I think the next one too. I'm starting March. I'm starting to do travel again with our regional moots are happening. So, but next one, February 24th, is still safe. But anyway, so there we go. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening, and Godspeed.